Move to session 2, which will be a continuation of this session. Maybe we can start with Shelby, if you're here. So in the previous session, we discussed a little bit about the use of GIS data for disaster management. Can you talk about the role of GIS and emerging geospatial technologies in public safety?
Sure. So, hi, thanks again for having me. There are a ton of uses of GIS and emerging geospatial technologies in public safety. I work for Montgomery County Police, and we are actively using a lot of these. David did a great overview of GIS and public safety in his keynote, but things like incorporating GIS into Next Gen 911, call routing, make sure that we use GIS data to dispatch units to the appropriate incidents, reducing response times, all that kind of stuff is GIS technology in public safety. In terms of emerging geospatial technologies, I feel like you could define that as a few different things. I think in public safety, we're seeing a trend towards moving towards indoor mapping. So like in Maryland, for example, there's a bill that just passed this year where we're going to map all of the schools, indoor mapping of the schools, probably using ArcGIS Indoors. It's still being looked at, but that's going to be really helpful for response for, say, if there's an active shooter in a school, right? Like for police to be able to see the layout before they even get there. In terms of indoor mapping, also, we're starting to see, and this is going to happen more, is collecting Z values, so elevation values with 911 calls. And that'll be able to translate to like the floor of a building instead of just, hey, there's an incident at this building. Now we'll be able to have that more precise location information. Some other emerging technology, it's not as maybe like sexy as artificial intelligence or something, but like moving from custom coding, right, to like low code, no code solutions. So using Esri technology like smart forms in Survey 123, we're doing a ton of that. Using Experience Builder to build dashboards and provide data to users that they've never been able to access so easily before. Also things like using webhooks in Power Automate, right? Being able to like send emails of GIS data has been so helpful. All of these tools have been able to have us do so much more than we were ever used to and give sworn staff a lot of access to data that they've never had before. So one cool thing that we're doing in Montgomery County is we have a drone as a first responder program, and we're one of the first agencies in the country to do this. But this is a cool emerging tech where what we have is we have 3 drones throughout the county, and they sit on top of buildings, and they can actually be dispatched by 911 when a call comes in for certain calls for service. So they sit on a building, they have a flight radius, and oftentimes they're the first on scene. They give a different perspective, right? Because we can see things from an aerial view. The response time for these drones is average of like 70 seconds versus minutes for on the ground first responders. They can help give instructions to officers that are on the ground, or they can also get dispatched and go to an incident and realize that an officer doesn't even need to be there. So we can free up our on the ground officers for other higher priority calls. So that's a really great use of emerging geospatial tech that we're doing in Montgomery County. And I brought up artificial intelligence earlier, and this is all kind of in the same vein, though, is we talk about these emerging techs, but we really have the challenge of balancing the incorporating these technologies, right, with like the fast-paced growth, understanding what the technologies are collecting. We have to be transparent with the community. We have to respect the laws and the regulations, engage our community when we're doing these types of programs. So while we are trying to incorporate these emerging technologies, it's also we're having to balance this complicated task, right, of making sure that we don't move too fast and that we are transparent with what we're doing when we're serving our community. So that's just a few examples of what we're doing in public safety.
Yeah, no, this is great. So you talked a little bit about the challenges. Are there any technological challenges, like technology that is missing and that you think that will evolve in the coming years?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I see lots of use for like generative AI solutions, making things easier for all of us to do our jobs and get that information out to the first responders. I just think that, and it's not just in public safety, it's government in general, right? Is trying to figure out like what what that technology really is and like what regulations we have to follow and what we're allowed to do. But I think it will be really useful once we lay more of a groundwork for what we need to do.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure we will have some other questions for you. Let's see if Praveen can join now, because I think he was able to join. Praveen, if you can try.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes.
All right. Sorry
Perfect.
about that.
Okay, so I guess if you don't remember my question, so GIS professionals are those who actually execute any GIS project. Over the years, you managed many teams and GIS projects across various sectors. Could you share the strategies that you found most effective in building strong, successful teams to execute these projects?
Thank you, Ran. Yeah, sure. So, of the three things in the between people, process, and technologies, I think people that component is the key, and the reason for that is that we are so tied to our roles that we walk into that we really don't get a full picture. So I think one of the enablers for any team member is that line of sight. What are the needs of that project, that mission, and how do you translate that so that everybody feels empowered and a contributor to that mission, to that project? And that understanding sort of builds the foundation for people feeling value for what they are doing. The second thing is that most of the time the work that we do is sort of handed over to us. Somebody needs a map or something, but as professionals, I think if we all encourage each other to think a little more, because we are the custodians and users of the data and we handle the data. So if I get a request, I encourage every team member and all of us to sort of think what else could be of additional value. And the idea behind that is to give a complete a common operating picture or a situational awareness that is sort of more, that has more value. How do you add more value? And that requires a little thinking out of the box. So if you encourage that, then there is a drive to dig for more data, to dig for more perspectives, and then allow them to present their idea, because that's the idea that was planted by them. So those are what that probably has helped me in like having a big team and a team that stays together, that is always thinking about adding value. Another thing that we have always found very useful among in my experience is, how do you enable and empower them? How do you think about their growth? And we all have most of the agency that we work for have enterprise licenses and access to a lot of online trainings. So sort of include that in there, performance evaluation as a target. What have you added? What skills have you added? What additional trainings have you gone to? And also work for them to be able to present at conferences and workshops. And that is also a big, thing that keeps the drive. It creates that environment of enablement, of trust, of being aware. And ultimately, the goal that we have sort of worked upon is that every member of the team becomes a brand ambassador for that project. They may not know everything about the project, but they can definitely direct you to that person who's building that section of the app or is handling that particular data set. So those things have been, and then in general, respect and trust across the board.
Okay, thank you. And one question unrelated. So you served as the conference chair for EURISA GIS Pro 2024. Can you discuss some of the emerging trends and advancements in the field of GIS that were highlighted in the conference?
Yeah, so thank you. GIS Pro is basically an annual sort of meetup where we tend to bring, information, the trending hot topics. So this year at the EURISA GIS Pro, EURISA has been rebranded as the Geospatial Professional Network. We had three key themes. One was climate and resiliency. That is a hot topic across the board for all GIS professionals. The second was the NSDI, the National Spatial Data Infrastructure. And the third one was AI and ML. So we had keynote speakers on these three important topics, and how these are sort of playing into a lot of work and development that we are seeing, the technology that the infusion of technology, the direction in which solutions are headed. We're headed in that direction.
Okay, thank you very much. I know there are a few other questions that from the audience, but we'll get back to it after this when we finish this session. So thank you. I'm
Thank
very
you.
happy you were able to join. So in the previous session, we elaborated on making geospatial data more accessible to the community and decision makers. Maggie, you are the executive director of OpenStreetMap US. Open data is also crucial for any GIS project, obviously. How do open data and open source technologies, specifically OSM, help advance geospatial policies and initiatives to benefit society?
How much time do we have? So, just kidding. Hi, everyone. Happy GIS Day. It's great to be here. I think maybe I should start with what is OSM for folks who
Please
may
do.
not know.
Yes.
Okay, great. For those of you who may not used OSM or maybe didn't know you were using the data, OpenStreetMap is a collaborative project. It's global to create a free, editable geospatial data commons of the entire world. It's been around 20 years. 2024 marks the 20th anniversary. And at this point, we have more than 10 million contributors, and we see about 4 million map changes each day. One thing I do like to say is it's more than a base map. It allows users to view, edit, and then use that geographic information however they want. No barriers there. The organization I serve is OpenStreetMap US. So we were the nonprofit organization founded in 2010 to support and convene all of the US stakeholders around the map, folks that rely on that OSM data, but also who contribute. So government, academia, the private sector, and the volunteer mapping community. We try to find the people behind the usernames. So going back to your question, advancing geospatial policies and initiatives to benefit society. Is that right? All right, let's see. I guess I probably am going to be echoing a lot of my fellow panelists here with a number of things, but that's good, right? It means it's important. So, thinking about accessibility, for 20 years, OSM has been making data available to a broad audience on a global level, especially in places that aren't completely as data rich as the US, allowing for transparency, accountability, democratization of kind of decision-making processes as people are able to map their own worlds. I think this is also true in accessibility to mapping. I think another panelist said that GIS is hard. So the OpenStreetMap platform has kind of become an on-ramp to learning those geospatial concepts and tools as we can start to bring in OSM into high schools. And it's not a scary thing to learn how to map a building. So that's something that OpenStreetMap US does through its Teach OSM program. Collaboration. I think one of the big things I've seen that has led to so many different innovations is the fact that people unite around OpenStreetMap who might not normally work together because they have the common goal of making all the roads the best roads in the country. So that collective interest in having the best map of the world has really brought together sometimes disparate interests on other topics. So driving that collaboration, and we have our annual conference, State of the Map US here in the US, and so many amazing things have come from that event and that collaboration. Innovation is another one I'd name. OpenStreetMap not only creates data, but it encourages folks to build open source software on top of the data to better leverage that data commons. OSM doesn't present itself as a map per se. You take the data that you need and you make your own maps. So many incredible open source software projects have come from the need to leverage OpenStreetMap. I've got two more. Empowerment. If you need to collect all of the trees in your community, you can. If you want to find play deserts or areas without, food deserts, you can map anything you need to advocate for change in your communities. So that empowerment really brings citizens into able to participate in the decision-making process and not wait for someone else to hand them data that may be biased. Policy development, speaking to that, I think we're seeing a shift in the reliance. There's always been a reliance on crowdsourced map data, but at least where I sit, I'm seeing more adoption by local and state governments, not only using data, but also contributing to it. I just heard the other day from Kendall County, Illinois, has started to maintain their address data directly in OpenStreetMap rather than keeping a separate GIS file on their desktop. So that kind of societal change, I think, is going to have an impact and going to increase over the coming years. This
is great. I think you touched about it, but can you talk a little bit about partnerships between OSM and other organizations or governments and how this partnership improve GIS projects?
Absolutely, it's my favorite topic. So one of the things we have 9 working groups through OSM US right now, which is a lot. But one of the big projects I'll highlight is our Trail Stewardship Initiative. So this was born out of an issue that was brought to light by the National Park Service. And if anybody's used a recreation app like Strava or AllTrails or anything that gets you outside, most of those companies rely on OpenStreetMap data for their trails. So this working group and initiative started, and we were able to bring together, the app companies, the land management agencies at the federal, state, and local levels, and then even the map contributors, some of the biggest map contributors across the country working on trails to start coming up with tagging standards and recommendations, rendering guidelines for if you're going to make a map with OpenStreetMap data, like here's some tagging things to think about. And bringing all those folks in a room. We've been meeting twice a month for 3 years with all of these stakeholders. And it's really been amazing to see how eager everyone is to collaborate to solve this problem.
Thank you, Maggie. Tim, so you're involved in many projects at Newlight that support governments and local agencies, including in the field of disaster management. From your experience, what are the current challenges or gaps agencies face when it comes to GIS data and technologies? You're muted.
Is that better?
Much better.
Awesome. So I have a lot of experience in different types of government agencies. I've worked with NASA, the Department of Energy Information, FEMA, on the federal level, but I've also worked for utilities companies like DC Water here in the district. I've seen a lot of different use cases for GIS, and I think some of the more seemingly intractable problems include things like data silos. So essentially, I don't know, information can be segregated from each other for a bunch of different reasons. It might be that the infrastructure that is containing the data, it's not interoperable with any other systems that the agency might be using. So rendering it, isolated and not particularly useful outside of its little silo. And I think some dangers that come with those silos include errors in data quality and consistency. If they're not being reviewed and standardized on a kind of holistic path, you might get different outcomes depending on the different data sets. And I guess especially in 2024, I've noticed in some of my customers that we have our eye focused on latency, the amount of time that comes from the data collection and its visualization and usage on a dashboard. So I think that comes with its own sort of challenges. Is like, how can we get real-time data and still have it be useful? I'm thinking specifically with one customer we have where we've built a dashboard with a 2-day latency, where like all of the real-time data we're showing, it's 48 hours late, which is useful, but it doesn't tell you what things are looking like today. And as we've been exploring some new candidates for real-time, like what is the situation on the ground right now, there's not that much confidence that you can compare this data set to the 48-hour data set. So because they might have different models kind of underpinning the assumptions that the data is trying to communicate. So they might not be able to compare apples to apples, even though they are seemingly the same data with just different lag times. But I think there are gaps and past the data. There are constraints with technology and software. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone on this call. Things are developing really fast. You might know something today, but that's not a guarantee you will understand it will exist as it does today 6 months from now, or it might just change. So keeping up with just the rapid pace of advancement that comes with this sort of software, I think, cash-strapped local governments might not be able to keep pace with the latest and greatest. So, I think because of that, some of these agencies might get trapped in some legacy systems. And, specifically in my work, I've seen that, for agencies that, span decades or even like centuries, early data is paper. And in this all digital world, if you have 60 years worth of paper documentation, I mean, you have like this artificial cutoff where your digital data just ends because it is not able to be integrated into these digital platforms. So I think maybe that is probably the hardest problem I've seen to be tackled with, is like, how do you digitize decades and decades worth of data so it can become usable in the 21st century? And I've got a whole list of other stuff, so maybe I'll do one or two more, and then I'll throw it back to you, Ron, for any follow-ups. But I think kind of taking into account all of this, relentless change, I think staffing then becomes a big consideration as well, because if things are constantly changing, if the software packages are updating and need to be or a library needs to be replaced, if the developer that came up with that tool left, I mean, who knows where it needs to go? So I think, staff turnover can throw a big wrench in development plans for some of these geospatial products. Maybe the staff is having trouble keeping pace with the new software. So maybe things are getting introduced that the staff is not equipped to use. So Yeah, I guess like I'm throwing a lot at you, so I'm just gonna like hang tight and yeah, Ron, back to you.
Yeah, yeah, no, thanks, Tim. So on the flip side, there are many projects that did work and are working. If you were to give it advice to other leaders or SMEs about projects that they are working on, what advice would you give them to succeed in GIS projects?
Sure. I am a very meticulous documenter, and to me that has saved my hide time and time again. Specifically working as like a consultant for a lot of these agencies, many times you're juggling a lot of different priorities simultaneously that are completely unrelated, and it's a lot like like spinning plates. If you have like seven plates spinning, you're going to have to kind of pay attention to all of them and make sure when one wobbles, you're going to the one that needs attention. So for me, I've noticed that a lot of times you just kind of got to be prepared to drop what you're doing and go to the most urgent next thing in your collective portfolio. And to me, the one thing that has facilitated that or even made it possible is just to create like an organizational documentation framework for myself that when I drop something, it lands in a coherent, organized place so that when I come back to it, I don't have to search for anything. And I think it's the documentation that allows you to kind of um, you, you don't have to lose time searching for stuff, and you can create it so that everything lands where you dropped it and makes it easier to come back to it when you need to.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tim.
Of course.
Sid, my question for you is more related to the practitioners who execute the GIS project. So until recently, you served as the chair of the RISA Vanguard Cabinet. What leadership skills do you think are required from GIS professionals to be successful in complex GIS projects?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, very good.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so thanks for having me. Just for everyone who's not aware, the Vanguard Cabinet is it's a committee under ERISA, or now the Geospatial Professionals Network, which is kind of focused on growing, promoting, supporting emerging professionals in the industry. In terms of the leadership skills that I think are critical, and I think Praveen touched on a lot of kind of what I'm going to say. You know, having that ability to think big, think outside the box, have that situational awareness or organizational understanding to know the meaning of your work or to help other people understand the meaning of their work, I think is a really critical skill. But also knowing, what motivates people, right? So your teammates, your leadership, your clients, your peers, your staff, what motivates them? Do they live to work? Do they work to live? Do they like certain aspects of work more than others? And how do you help facilitate that? As well as understanding what the users or your clients care about. How do you craft a solution or build something that meets that need or helps them address the problem that they're focused on? A lot of times I think we just get really focused on building a solution. We need a map or an app or a dashboard, and we kind of rush to build it, and we don't always think about all of those other motivations and how is it going to be used, and things like that. So being able to understand that, I think, is really important. It will also help you motivate your team, just like Praveen said. When you have your team motivated and they're thinking about the extra piece or the more that they could do, I think that's when teams really start to hit like a really good stride. And a good way to help make that happen is get people used to like understanding what are the organization's goals, what's the roadmap, what's the strategic plan, both for your team, your larger organization, the customers or the users that you're supporting, and help people find the pieces of those plans that they can really support or speak to with whatever they're with whatever they're developing. Because I think that when the whole team starts kind of thinking that way or speaking the same language, it makes it a lot easier to push change forward and make things happen and help people find that excitement or enjoyment in what they're doing because they feel like they're making a difference.
Great. Sid, do you have an example of a project you worked on that was particularly successful, and what advice would you give to other professionals according to what you learned?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the work that, Ron, we've done together in support of FEMA, supporting natural disaster response, I would say a lot of those efforts have been particularly successful, largely because we get everyone behind the mission, right? We're there to help FEMA, we're there to help the survivors. And again, it really just, in my mind, it comes down to helping people understand the mission and the value of the work that they're doing. When I first got involved with a lot of the work, it was really easy to seem like we're just, looking at imagery and classifying damage at a structure. But when you really think about, the bigger picture of, someone's now able to take that information and help someone get the financial assistance they need to rebuild faster than they've done before, or prevent a first responder from having to go into a potentially dangerous situation in person because we've done some of that work, at behind the computer, and saving time, keeping people out of harm's way and things like that. Once everyone started to see that picture and really get behind the mission, I think, you know, everything just kind of moved forward so much faster. Everyone was excited to be there and to help, even though the hours are grueling and it's hard work. But I think you find that it might be a little weird to say it this way, but that enjoyment in the work because you're making a difference and helping people, and just keeping that mindset, across your team, I think is a great way to keep people motivated and make positive change.
Thank you, Sid. That was great. So I think we have a few more questions from the audience. So for Mika, I think. So one question was, what OGC specifications have been most impactful on your work? Mika, if you are still here. Okay, maybe not. We'll get back to it in a minute. Another question that we have is, how are your experiences with GIS integrated with cloud technologies and services? Who wants to take that? GIS and cloud technologies. Kendrick, maybe you want?
Yeah, I think it's very important that we really start to look at cloud environments from a scalability perspective. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so I think
Yes.
it's very important that we really start to look at that from a scalability perspective. Many times and all times we're working with large databases. I know the ArcGIS has like vector velocity, and it talks about when you're using bigger data sets. But uh, I always think that we should always be above above, and quantum computing is coming very fast, and grafting is coming very fast. And so um, the idea of having that one shape file sitting there and you manipulating that, or a file geodatabase, um, the way that data is coming through sensors and things of that sort, it's going to be very important for us to look at GCP, to look at Azure environments, to look at AWS environments, and also looking for getting at the edge, right? And so being able to understand how do we develop and architect real-time systems. I know that, hey, most of us here now are talking in the DMV environment, but if we're supporting our federal government, our federal agencies, especially at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, a lot of our combatant commands, we have now started to focus on combatant commands. And so we have to kind of understand cloud services, just from a GIS perspective, but a whole data delivery perspective as well. When we look at dashboards and we look at those particular things as well, the services, the data has ratcheted up from the days. Somebody put ArcView 3.2. I mean, think about that was a shape file and it took us forever to get that done, to now being able to have a full swath of data. Cloud services is where we need to start focusing, and it's already happening. I mean, and so I would just say a lot of GIS professionals, it'll be great to get AWS solution architect certs. A lot of these certs, even looking at Salesforce and these things that we can bring into our systems, are also very important as well.
Okay, thank you, Kendrick. So it's now 12:30. If you can all the panelists go online again with on camera. I just want to really thank you all for a great session. Thank you, Monica, Kendrick, Quentin, Mika, Brooke, Praveen, Shelby, Maggie, Tim, and Sid for a very interesting session.